You are tuned in to a Fireside chat with Zany Mystic. Join us now on another exciting metaphysical journey. Relax, tune in, drop out, and take a seat by the fire as we explore new realms and possibilities. This is Magenta Pixie. You can find me at magentapixie.weebly.com. But now, here is Zany Mystic and guest. Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Fireside Chat with Zany Mystic. I'm your host, Lance White. Tonight, my guest is ALEX KOCHKIN, who returns to the show for his second visit. Since a very early age, ALEX has been aware of the vastness of consciousness and has been concerned with human evolution. This has also served to develop an ongoing interest in the natural and physical sciences. Since early 1989, he has been consciously devoted to the spiritual and physical transformation of the individual, humanity, and of the earth. And that's with a specific emphasis on the process that many are referring to as ascension at this time. To find out more about his present work, you can go to www.pfcn.com. So, let's welcome ALEX back to the show now. Hi, ALEX. How are you? It's net, not com.
Thank you, Lance. It's good to hear from you.
Oh, well, it's
nice
good to have you back.
Yeah.
Well, you know, there's been a lot that's been going on since we talked last, and I think one of the most prevalent memes out there is people are reporting multiple UFO sightings, and there was one in I think New York. People are seeing them all over the place, and that there's going to be disclosure. There's a lot of different information coming from just about everybody out there, and I thought maybe you could touch upon your thoughts on that, and then we might want to get into some other subjects. So maybe we could talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, I don't like to get too distracted by some of these things, but it ties in with the bigger picture in so many ways that it is worth. It's probably a good departure point here.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of a disclaimer or disclosure, I guess. Pardon the pun. Is I certainly am aware of other beings, and that there's various different kinds, and the specifics of the who's and the what's and all of this, it starts sounding like some racial profile of humans on Earth is totally irrelevant, and these are all spurious claims that different people make, and there's absolutely, as far as I'm concerned, not much to substantiate. But I don't have a problem with this, so I want to make that clear, that is not a question. To me, the big issue or the big problem with this is what I see is to be a deliberate as well as automatic or prepared confusion or confounding of the notions of disclosure of what are obviously, at least to me and many others, secret government relations with secret other kinds of non-human, either terrestrial-based or non-terrestrially based entities.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so, again, this is not a question or a concern of mine. More the matter is the confusion and confounding that has taken place over many, many years, and what a serious problem that this can result in, and why I think it's somewhat deliberate. So on one hand, there have been many people for many years very honestly and earnestly trying to deal with getting somebody to say, yes, they're real. And this isn't just made up.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, for the early period, most of the conversation. I'm not imagining things. I really did see things. There was phenomena, et cetera, et cetera. And, of course, in most cases, this was met with denial, even when it found its way on the pages of Look magazine or Life magazine, when those were the major picture news magazines for the U.S. And those of us that remember the advent of all of this can recall the stories and pictures of something over the White House and Capitol grounds back in, I forget when, 50s or 60s.
Yeah.
Real photos, black and white, emulsion film, the whole 9 yards, and the Betty and Barney Hill stories and all of this stuff.
Right.
Now, so when many people initially were just trying to prove the point that they weren't crazy, and they were doing an early version of a Fox Mulder on the X-Files, that was very convenient to keep the momentum of that particular set of memes going all along. And then later, fast forward into more recent period, you have the various people addressing the strangeness of abduction phenomena. And so, and then even there, it would always be confused, is this really something non-human and alien from this world, or was this
a military operation?
Yeah, some secret shadow government stuff, et cetera,
Yeah, or a combination of both.
Well, exactly, and this is where there's a little bit of truth and there's a bit of falsehoods, and after all, no one can sort it out. And so today, what we have is a confounding and a confluence of both a little bit of momentum from the early days, which has been deliberately encouraged, I believe, by those who have an interest in encouraging this, and I'm referring to those that have an interest in manipulating society, as opposed to the honest researchers who are trying to make their case. So we have a mixture of an interest in disclosure, in trying to get various people who have genuine, solid credentials. I don't mean the flakes who are writing books these days, but I mean people who are really there's no question about their background. So there have been efforts to try to get people who are retired or even currently employed by various technology companies or military, et cetera, to speak about these things, to at least state what they know and to provide public acknowledgement. And just that one effort alone always struck me as rather odd, especially since most people who are fairly attuned to these things know that making an intellectual argument, especially on something that has very little tangibility, is not going to convince anyone one way or the other. And for those rare people you could convince that it's really true, there will be as many who will suddenly go, oh, I don't know, and become skeptical. So the result is no serious gain. What has really built up public awareness and acknowledgement has simply been the influence of TV, movies, Hollywood, and to some extent a little bit of those people saying that this is true, and they can read about UFOs and history and contemporary, since there have been many books written about various secret sorts of things from Roswell forward. So we have a question as to why was that really so important. Now we have because who is to be convinced, and what has to come of such an effort? And when you consider the amount of work and effort needed to organize any kind of a public venue, that public venue will be denied by those who are in a position of influence and control. And the subject of the extraterrestrial, or let's just say non-human influences in this world, whether they be terrestrially based or elsewhere, is such a sensitive and very delicate subject that touches on the whole nature of the power structures here. That just like it was that you might as well just watch the X-Files episodes and you'll be just as well informed. Because they actually did a very good job of it in many respects.
Yeah, definitely.
So I raise this as a point so that, a lot of people think, well, you have to have secret knowledge, you have to have clairvoyant remote viewing abilities. And the point is that there is enough information that if people take a moment and just look calmly and dispassionately at the very words and meaning, which I know is harder and harder these days for people to do, enough questions can be raised by at least somebody who has their critical faculties reasonably intact, that they can wonder what's the truth of the matter. So now we have a combination or confluence here of both the efforts to disclose something that is, at least from my concerns, pointless to even make an effort at. Those who know and those who believe know, and they believe. End of the discussion. So now you have to wonder what's going on, because then there's the question about extraterrestrial contact. And now you're touching on something that goes way back to ancient times and touches on one of the biggest mystery secrets that's been concealed for ages, and that is the influences and presence and contact of non-human, non-terrestrial beings on this planet for a very, 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 very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not all from Mars or Moon or anything, placed very local. So even that becomes a confusing matter for many people. So then you have to consider what has gone into many of the religious and spiritual belief systems. And we don't have the time to go into this, but there is enough good information written in English by some researchers who have actually done their own research as opposed to rehashing everyone else's work, to actually highlight the likelihood and the evidence in what there is of various kinds of non-terrestrial, non-human beings on this planet. And from my perspective, that what brings things into the present is the potential influence of these ideas in terms of preparing humans for the idea of a Messiah, a second coming, a new landing of more beings. We're coming back for you. And this even confuses many indigenous people. And then, of course, those that are not part of those cultures don't know the difference. They think just because so-and-so, who obviously is an old and wrinkled member and venerated of a certain tribe in a certain part of the world, says it's true, it must be that they're full of spiritual wisdom. And for all anyone knows, they really have got it a little mixed up themselves. And perhaps what they're referring to is actually some of their, their early ancestors. And they're not really referring to all humans. Even that gets confused. And I know this firsthand from a number of sources. And so, I think the big question is, what is all this about? And then when we look at and so there's a question of disclosing something that is essentially common knowledge amongst all those people who acknowledge that, we're not alone. I've probably been here. I've actually seen weird stuff, or maybe I've had contact or know someone. We even included that in our national study several years ago. So what we have here is something else, and that is not about the disclosure that there's been involvement and connections. The question really has to do with what's the relationship and what are the agendas. And as far as I'm concerned, those kinds of entities that have been buzzing in and out of here or hanging out in secret bases, whether they be operating in 3D or in some slightly higher dimensional type of space, are not what I would call the good guys, and it's a bit like you'd warn the children, don't take candy from strangers and don't get into strangers' cars. But most people presume, and this is part of the heritage of many of the techno-intellectual circles of modern from the 20th century, and that is, if you're more advanced technologically and you can travel vast distances or do magical stuff, therefore you must be more developed and therefore more evolved, and therefore you must have a higher ethos. And of course, when you overlay the huge influence that various very dark entities have had in creating what we now call today the New Age tendencies, starting back 100 years with Theosophy, and many other, by the way, tendencies that have other kinds of names to this day. It was to prepare people for the potential and possibility of coming under the direct control and more overt control of other kinds of entities. Meanwhile, all along, there have been invisibles, and they've been hinted at by many different types of seers and analysts, both. And I'm speaking now both of those with better, higher than ordinary seeing abilities, as well as those who
You are tuned in to a Fireside Chat with Zany Mystic. Join us now on another exciting metaphysical journey. Relax, tune in, drop out, and take a seat by the fire as we explore new realms and possibilities. This is Magenta Pixie. You can find me at magentapixie.weebly.com. But now, here is Zany Mystic and guest. Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Fireside Chat with Zany Mystic. Some other subjects, so maybe we could talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, I don't like to get too distracted by some of these things, but it ties in with the bigger picture in so many ways that it's probably a good departure point here. Mm-hmm. Sort of a disclaimer or disclosure, I guess, pardon the pun, is I certainly am aware of other beings and that there's various different kinds, and the specifics of
emphasis on the process that many are referring to as ascension at this time. To find out more about his present work, you can go to www.pfcn.com. So, let's welcome Alex back to the show now. Hi, Alex. How are you? It's net, not com.
Thank you, Lance. It's good to hear from you.
Oh, well, it's
nice
good to have you back.
Yeah.
Well, you know, there's been a lot that's been going on since we talked last, and I think one of the most prevalent memes out there is people are reporting multiple UFO sightings, and there was one in I think New York. People are seeing them all over the place, and that there's going to be disclosure. There's a lot of different information coming from just about everybody out there, and I thought maybe you could touch upon your thoughts on that, and then we might want to get into, I'm your host, Lance White. Tonight, my guest is ALEX KOCHKIN, who returns to the show for his second visit. Since a very early age, Alex has been aware of the vastness of consciousness and has been concerned with human evolution. This has also served to develop an ongoing interest in the natural and physical sciences. Since early 1989, he has been consciously devoted to the spiritual and physical transformation of the individual, humanity, and of the earth. And that's with a specific